Winter possessed teeth that year, biting deep into the Montana high country long before the calendar turned. The snow had begun falling at noon, a relentless curtain of white that erased the horizon, and by dusk, the world was nothing but gray shadows and biting cold. Thorne stood in the doorway of his ranch house, a hand resting instinctively near the Colt peacemaker on his hip. He wasn't a rancher by trade, not originally. The land was his penance, the cattle his distraction. But the way he stood, balanced and ready, betrayed the gunslinger he had been. He watched the ridge, his eyes narrowing against the wind. Something was moving out there. It wasn't a horse. It wasn't a wolf. It was a silhouette, struggling against the drifts. Thorne watched the figure stumble, rise, and keep coming. As the shape drew closer, color bled through the monochrome landscape. It was a jarring, impossible splash of light pink. A woman was climbing his ridge in a light pink prairie dress, the hem ragged and wet, completely unsuited for a gentle spring rain, let alone a mountain blizzard. She didn't stop until she reached the porch steps. She was small, shivering so violently her teeth made a sound like dice in a cup. Thorne opened the door, blocking the heat with his broad frame. She looked up. She was Chinese, her features delicate, her skin pale as the snow around them. Her dark hair was plastered to her skull by melted flakes. She looked barely 20, her eyes wide with the terror of a rabbit facing a wolf, but she didn't run. "I am looking for work," she said. Her voice was thin, brittle as ice. Thorne stared at her. "Work? Any work. I can cook. I can clean. I can mend." Thorne looked at her hands. They were blue with cold, but he could see they were soft. These were not hands that chopped wood or scrubbed floors. These were hands meant for silk and tea. "You're freezing," he said roughly, "and you're wearing a summer dress in a blizzard." "It is all I have." She hugged her arms around her chest. "Please, I will work for wages. Honest work." "Why here?" Thorne asked. "Town is 5 miles back. Town is not safe. You are far away." Thorne almost laughed, a dry, humorless sound. He was the most dangerous thing in this territory, yet she felt safer here than in the settlement. He looked at her eyes. He recognized the look. It was the look of someone running from a devil they knew into the arms of a devil they didn't. "I don't need a housekeeper," Thorne said. "I live alone for a reason." She straightened her spine, a flash of defiance in her dark eyes. "I do not ask for charity. I ask for trade. Labor for shelter." The wind howled, driving a fresh spray of snow onto the porch. If he turned her away, she would be dead within the hour. Thorne cursed silently. He had spent 5 years trying to wash the blood off his hands with honest sweat, and now fate was dumping a half-frozen girl on his doorstep. "Bunkhouse is 50 yards back," he said, pointing to a dark structure. "Stove works. Wood is stacked. We'll talk in the morning." She nodded once, a sharp, jerky motion. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. You survived the night, then you can thank me." "My name is May," she whispered. "Thorne." He watched her trudge toward the bunkhouse, a tragic figure in pink against the brutal white. He closed the door, shutting out the cold, but the silence of the house felt heavier than usual. He sat at his table, cleaning his gun by lamplight, wondering what kind of trouble had just walked onto his land. May emerged the next morning before the sun had fully crested the peaks. The snow had stopped, leaving the world scoured and clean. Thorne found her in the barn, trying to lift a grain sack that weighed nearly as much as she did. He watched her struggle for a moment. She gritted her teeth, her small frame straining, but she didn't ask for help. Finally, he stepped forward and hoisted the sack with one hand. "Feed bin is over there," he said. She jumped, spinning around. "I can do it." "I know you can. But the cattle need feeding today, not next week." He dropped the sack. "You know how to handle stock." "No. But I learn quickly." "You know how to cook." "Yes. That I know." "Good. Because I'm tired of eating my own cooking." He looked her over. She was still wearing the pink dress, though she had wrapped a rough blanket around her shoulders like a shawl. You can't work in that. It is. My only dress. She looked down, ashamed. Thorn sighed. I'm going to town for supplies. Stay inside. Keep the fires going. He rode into redemption under a sky the color of bruised iron. The town was waking up, smoke curling from chimneys. Thorn tied his horse at the general store. Mrs. Higgins was behind the counter weighing flour. She stiffened when Thorn walked in. People always did. They remembered the stories of the men he'd put in the ground. "Morning, Thorn," she said cautiously. "Mrs. Higgins," he placed a list on the counter. "And I need a coat. Heavy wool. Smallest size you have. And some boots." "Small." Mrs. Higgins raised an eyebrow. "You taken astray, Thorn? Hired help." "Help? Rumor says a Chinese girl was seen walking up your road." "Rumor talks too much." "Is she?" Mrs. Higgins lowered her voice. "Is she a working girl? The brothel in the mining camp closed down last week." Thorn's eyes went cold. "She's a housekeeper. And she's a lady. You'd do well to remember that." He paid and left. Outside, he ran into Gideon Black. Black was the town banker, a man who wore his morality like a suit of armor, stiff, shiny, and hollow. "Thorn," Black said, blocking the boardwalk. "Heard you have a guest." "Employee," Thorn corrected. "A young Chinese woman. Alone on your ranch," Black sneered. "It doesn't look right. The decent folk of redemption don't want that kind of element settling here." "The decent folk mind their own business," Thorn said, his hand drifting near his holster. "And she's working. Honest labor." "I'm sure she is," Black said with a lewd smirk. "We know what those women are raised for." Thorn stepped into Black's space. The air temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "She came asking for work. I told her she'd find more than wages here. I meant respect. You try offering the same." He brushed past the banker, mounting his horse. He rode hard back to the ranch, the wool coat tied behind his saddle. When he returned, he found the kitchen scrubbed cleaner than it had been in years. A pot of rice and venison broth simmered on the stove, smelling of ginger and garlic, scents that had never existed in this kitchen. May stood when he entered. He tossed the bundle to her. "Put these on. That pink thing is going to get you killed." She opened the package, touching the rough wool of the coat. She looked up, her eyes swimming with tears. "I cannot pay for this yet. It's an advance. Put it on." "Why?" she asked softly. "Everyone else. They threw stones. They called me names. You give me a coat." "It's winter," Thorn grunted. "I don't like frozen help." Weeks passed. The winter deepened. The rhythm of the ranch changed. Thorn worked the cattle. May worked the house. They ate dinner together in silence that slowly became companionable. One evening by the fire, she told him. "My father sold me," she said, staring at the flames, "to a man who recruits for the brothels in San Francisco. They were taking us by wagon. I ran when we stopped near the mining camp." Thorn stopped whittling a piece of pine. He didn't look up. "You get away clean." "I ran into the snow. I ran until I saw your lights." She paused, her voice trembling. I have never been with a man. That is why I ran. I wanted to save myself for a life I chose." Thorn looked at her then. The pink dress made sense now. It was the costume of a doll intended for a shelf. The realization that she was a virgin, untouched and terrified, battling a Montana winter to keep her dignity, struck a chord in him he thought had rotted away. "You're safe here, May," he said. "Nobody touches you here unless you say so. That's my word." "Your word is strong," she said. "I see how you carry it. Like your gun. Heavy," he admitted. "Necessary." The peace was shattered 2 nights later. Thorn woke to the sound of frantic barking and the scream of a horse. He grabbed his rifle and ran out in his long johns and boots. May was already there. She stood by the corral holding a pitchfork. 3 timber wolves were circling the spooked horses. The wolves were gaunt, desperate with hunger. One wolf lunged at a foal. May didn't scream. She stepped forward, thrusting the pitchfork. The tines caught the wolf in the shoulder, turning it, but the beast snapped its jaws, catching the hem of her new coat. Thorn didn't hesitate. He raised the rifle and fired. The shot cracked the frozen air. The wolf dropped. The others scattered into the dark. Thorn ran to her. "You hurt." May was shaking, still holding the pitchfork aimed at the dead wolf. I am fine. The horses. They're fine." He took the pitchfork from her hands. "You stood your ground against a pack of wolves with a farming tool." "They wanted the little one," she said, pointing to the foal. "It wasn't right." Thorn looked at her, small, foreign, dressed in oversized wool and boots, standing over a dead predator. "Get inside," he said gently. "I'll clean this up." January brought the true cold. The thermometer bottomed out, and the wind didn't stop for days. One morning, Thorn found the pipes to the bunkhouse frozen solid. The small stove out there wasn't enough against 30 below. "Gather your things," he told her. "You're moving into the main house." She hesitated. "Mr. Thorn, it is improper." "Freezing to death is improper," he snapped. "There's a spare room at the back. Lock the door if it makes you feel better. But I'm not having you turn into a block of ice on my property." She moved in. The dynamic shifted. They were closer now. She mended his shirts in the evening while he cleaned his guns. She hummed songs in a language he didn't understand. "What is that song?" he asked one night. "It is about a plum blossom," she said. "It blooms in winter. It is the only flower that does not fear the frost." "Sounds like you," Thorn said. She smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed her face. "And you? What do you fear?" "Gunslinger." "I fear the quiet," he said. "And the past." "The past is a ghost," May said. "It cannot hurt you if you do not let it in." "Some ghosts have keys," Thorn muttered. The blizzard that hit in February was a monster. Came screaming down from the north, burying the world. Thorn realized too late that a drift had buried the gate to the south pasture. The herd was trapped in a box canyon, and if he didn't break a trail and get hay to them, they'd be dead by morning. "I'm going," he said, wrapping a scarf around his face. "I am coming with you," May said. She was already buttoning her coat. "No, it's too dangerous. You cannot drive the sled and cut the wire alone in this wind. You need hands." "May." "I am not asking." They fought the storm for 3 hours. The wind was a physical weight pushing them back. They reached the cattle, cut the wire, and dropped the hay. The animals were huddled together, coated in ice. On the way back, disaster struck. The sled hit a hidden rock. Thorn was thrown clear, but May was pinned for a second before the sled slid sideways into a ravine. "May!" Thorn scrambled down the slope. She was lying in the snow. She tried to stand but cried out, "My ankle!" Thorn didn't waste time. He scooped her up. The horses had spooked and run off. The ranch house was 2 miles away, invisible in the whiteout. But the line shack, a small emergency shelter, was closer. "Hold on!" he roared over the wind. He carried her for a mile, his lungs burning, his legs turning to lead. When he kicked open the door of the line shack, he practically fell inside. He got the fire started with shaking hands. May was pale, her lips blue. The cold had seeped deep. "We have to get warm," he said. "May, listen to me. We have to share heat." She looked at him, fear warring with trust. She nodded. He kept his word. They lay under the moldy blankets, fully clothed, wrapped together. He held her simply to keep her alive. He felt the delicate beat of her heart against his chest. He felt how small she was and how fierce. "You are warm," she whispered into his shoulder. "Just stay awake," he commanded softly. "Thorn." "Yeah." "You are not a bad man. You are just lonely." "Maybe," he said. "Maybe I'm both." They survived the night. By morning, the storm broke. Thorn splinted her ankle, and they limped back to the ranch house. They were alive, but the damage was done. Not to their bodies, but to their standing. Joss, Thorn's occasional ranch hand, rode up 2 days later. He looked grim. "Town's talking, Thorn," Joss said, not dismounting. "Gideon Black saw your horses come back without you. Then he saw you two walk in a day later. He's telling everyone you were holed up in that shack for 3 days with the Chinese girl." "We were trapped by the storm," Thorn said. "She twisted her ankle." "Black doesn't care about facts. He says it's an abomination. Says you're keeping a concubine. The church ladies are in a fit. They want to drive her out." "Let them try," Thorn said, his hand twitching. "They're holding a town meeting on Sunday. Black is calling for a vote to remove undesirable elements from the valley. Meaning her." Thorn looked at the house where May was resting. "Thanks, Joss." That evening, Thorn sat at the kitchen table. "You should go," he said heavily. "I can give you money. Send you to Denver. You can get a real job there. Be safe." May set down her teacup. "You are sending me away. I'm trying to protect you. These people, they're going to come for you, and I'll have to kill them to stop it. And then I'll hang, and you'll be alone anyway." May stood up, wincing on her bad ankle. "I ran from men who wanted to own me. I ran from men who wanted to use me. I walked through a blizzard to find a place where I could stand on my own 2 feet. I will not run because of gossip. It's not just gossip, May. It's hate." "Then we face it," she said. "You said I found more than wages here. You said I found respect. Was that a lie?" Thorn looked at her. He saw the pink dress she had arrived in, hanging dried and clean on a hook by the door, a symbol of the fragile, foolish hope she had carried up that ridge. And he saw the woman standing before him now, strong as steel. "No," Thorn said. "It wasn't a lie." Sunday morning. The church in Redemption was full. Gideon Black stood at the pulpit, his voice booming with righteous indignation. "We must protect the moral fabric of our community," Black shouted. "We cannot allow our valley to become a den of sin. This gunslinger and his heathen woman." The doors at the back of the church flew open. Thorn walked in. He wasn't wearing his ranch clothes. He was dressed in black, his dust coat swept back to reveal the colt on his hip. He looked like the reaper he used to be. But he wasn't alone. May walked beside him. She wore the heavy wool coat, her head held high, limping slightly but supported by his arm. The congregation went silent. Thorn walked down the center aisle, the sound of his boots like hammer strikes on a coffin lid. He stopped in front of the pulpit and stared up at Gideon Black. "You have something to say about my household, Gideon?" Thorn asked. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried to the rafters. "Thorn," Black stammered, "this is a house of God. You have no business bringing." "I have every business," Thorn interrupted. "You're standing here judging a woman you don't know. You call her names. You question her virtue." Thorn turned to face the crowd. This woman walked through a blizzard in a summer dress to find honest work. She faced down a wolf pack to save a foal. She worked herself to the bone to help me keep my stock alive during the storm. She has more courage in her little finger than this whole town has in its collective spine. He looked back at Black. "And as for her virtue, she is a maiden. She is untouched. Which is more than I can say for the company you keep, Gideon, considering I saw you leaving the mining camp brothel 3 months ago." Gasps rippled through the room. Black turned a brilliant shade of purple. "That is a lie." "Is it?" Thorn stepped closer, his hand resting on his gun. "You want to call me a liar, Gideon? You know what happens when men call me a liar." Black shrank back. The silence stretched, tense and brittle. "May is not my concubine," Thorn said, his voice dropping to a rumble. "She is my partner. And as of this morning," he pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "She is my wife." He held up the marriage license they had signed with the circuit judge an hour before. "So," Thorn said, "any man here who has a problem with Mrs. Thorn can take it up with me. Right now." No one moved. Mrs. Higgins in the back row started to clap. Slowly, a few others joined in. Ranchers who knew what winter was like, men who respected grit more than gossip. Thorn offered his arm to May. Let's go home. They walked out into the sunlight. Spring came late to the high country, but when it arrived, it was glorious. The valley turned a shocking green, and the creek ran clear and cold. Thorn stood on the porch, watching the sunset. He felt a hand on his arm. May stood beside him. She wasn't wearing the wool coat anymore. She was wearing a simple, practical dress of blue cotton, but she had tied a strip of the old pink fabric around her hair like a ribbon. They are still talking, May said softly. Let them talk, Thorn said. We have cattle to move tomorrow. You are a good man, husband. I'm a work in progress, he said. He looked down at her. The gunslinger's eyes, usually constantly scanning for threats, softened. He looked only at her. I asked for work, she mused. And I found a life. Thorn pulled her close, the colt on his hip forgotten, the ghosts of his past finally silent. Yeah, he said, watching the stars begin to prick the twilight. You did. On the mantel inside, a small wooden plum blossom Thorn had carved sat next to an old, faded pink ribbon. The winter was over. The wolves were gone. And the gunslinger and the virgin had found something that neither the cold nor the town could ever take away. They had found home.